My father-in-law said I wasn't good enough for his family's standards and gave the food I had cooked to the dogs. I left the house the next day, but a month later, when he arrived at the grand opening of his biggest hotel, he froze when he saw the woman walking out of the kitchen. My father-in-law sat at the dinner table and said that I was not good enough for his family's standards, then had the roast chicken I had spent the entire day cooking slowly taken from its silver serving tray and dumped into the dogs' bowls in the backyard. No one stopped him that night, not even my husband, Michael, who simply straightened his napkin, lifted his glass of water, and sat there as though it were nothing more than a minor family misunderstanding, when in that exact moment I understood that sometimes a woman is not thrown out of a home. She is made to feel so small that she eventually opens the door and leaves on her own. It happened 1 week before Thanksgiving. Their large suburban house outside Boston was filled with warm lights. A crystal chandelier hung above the dining room, family portraits covered the walls, and around the table sat people who spoke softly about manners, legacy, standards, and reputation, while carrying a cruelty sharper than any knife. I had spent 5 years in that house. I had attended PTA meetings as the perfect wife and mother, turned Sunday Costco trips into a family tradition, and sat beside Michael discussing retirement plans for 1K statements and the future. But that night, I realized I had never truly been part of that family's future. I had simply been a useful woman standing quietly in the background. My father-in-law, Richard Whitmore, was a well-known hotel owner. He owned 3 boutique hotels and a large restaurant chain, and he talked about taste in almost every conversation, as though good taste were a gift God had reserved exclusively for the Whitmore family. He looked at my plate, then at me. "Emily, you're a nice girl, but the women in our family don't just cook. They maintain standards." Then he called the housekeeper, told her to take away the tray, and said, "Give it to the dogs. At least they won't complain." No one laughed, but the silence was not on my side either. Michael's sister, Claire, stared into her wine glass. My mother-in-law, Patricia, pressed her lips together. Michael only said, "Dad, please." But there was no protection in that please. He was not defending me. He was trying to keep the room comfortable. That was when I learned something I should have understood years earlier. A man who protects the atmosphere after someone humiliates you will never protect you. I did not make a scene that night. I removed my apron, folded it neatly on the kitchen counter, and washed the pans in the sink because my hands had always been trained to finish what they started, even when my heart had broken somewhere in the middle. Then I went upstairs, took out my suitcase, and packed a few clothes, my passport, certificates, some cash, and my mother's old recipe notebook, the one she had given me before she died. Michael stood in the bedroom doorway. "Where are you going?" I looked at him calmly. "Somewhere my cooking won't be considered dog food." The next morning I left. There was no dramatic goodbye, no slammed door, no swollen eyes. I got into my car, placed my coffee in the cup holder, and drove onto the highway. I did not go to Seattle, where my college friend Nora lived. I went to New York instead, rented a small room, and started working in a catering kitchen where people judged me by my food, not my last name or my degree. I had never completed culinary school, but what I had learned standing beside my mother in our small South Carolina kitchen was worth more to me than any certificate. Patience, heat, timing, salt, silence, those were languages I understood. Richard probably expected me to return, not to receive an apology, but to give one. Michael's messages came regularly. First gentle, then tired, then practical. "Dad didn't mean it. You're overreacting. Think about our life." "What about the house?" I remembered the house. I remembered the mortgage, the 401k plans, and the Thanksgiving dinners where everyone pretended we were happy. But more than any of that, I remembered my own hand holding the serving spoon that night, and then holding nothing. For 1 month, I tried to prove nothing to anyone. I worked. I woke at 5 every morning to the sound of the coffee machine, took the subway, chopped onions at a prep table, made sauces, read orders, and came home exhausted at night. Then I opened Mom's notebook and worked on one particular recipe. Smoked paprika, orange zest, brown butter, thyme. The same chicken Richard had ordered thrown into the dogs' bowls. Only this time, I stopped treating that dish as a memory of humiliation. I made it my signature. Nora's husband worked in hospitality consulting. One of his clients needed a chef for a private tasting connected to the opening of a new hotel. The investors were confidential, and I never asked who owned the property. Sometimes life brings you back into a room where you were once humiliated. The difference is that this time, you are not the guest, you are the reason everyone came. Opening night was 1 month later. The venue was in Manhattan, Richard Whitmore's largest property, the Whitmore Grand. The opening ceremony was filled with media, investors, food critics, local officials, and people whose opinions could decide whether a restaurant became impossible to book or disappeared within a year. I learned whose hotel it was only 2 days before the opening, when I saw the name on the final contract papers. Nora looked at me. "You can back out." I shook my head. "No. I've already made the food." That night, I wore a black chef's coat. My hair was neatly tied back. No heavy makeup, no trembling hands. The kitchen was hot, the steel counters gleamed under bright lights, and the staff moved quickly around me. At my station, the final plates were ready: roasted chicken with brown butter glaze, charred carrots, cranberry reduction, and a delicate herb crumble inspired by something Mom used to make from holiday leftovers. I looked at every plate as though I were shaping an answer, but there was no anger left in me. Only clarity. Richard entered the ballroom with cameras following him. Michael was there, along with Patricia and Claire. There were speeches about legacy, family standards, excellence, and taste. Then, after the opening menu received extraordinary praise, a food critic asked for the culinary team to come out. The executive manager stepped forward and announced, "Our guest culinary lead tonight, Emily Carter." I walked through the kitchen doors. Richard stopped where he stood. There was no music for that moment. No glass shattered. No one gasped dramatically. But I watched a man who had spent his entire life measuring other people stand face to face with the smallness of his own judgment. Michael whispered my name, as though he could not understand how the woman he had failed to stop from leaving had become the culinary force behind his father's biggest hotel opening. One of the food critics turned to Richard. "Mr. Whitmore, whoever created this chicken understands restraint better than most chefs in this city." I looked at Richard. I did not smile. I did not lower my head. I simply said, "Thank you." It was inspired by my mother's recipe. Richard had no answer. Maybe he wanted to apologize. Maybe he wanted to explain. Maybe he wanted to say something that would put the world back in the order he understood. But sometimes silence is a complete confession. I did not prepare another plate for him that night, not as revenge, but because my work was already finished. The dish he had once called dog food had helped make his hotel's opening night a success. Today, I do not live in Boston. I do not live with Michael, and I no longer live beneath the shadow of the Whitmore family. I have my own small catering studio in New York. Morning sunlight comes through the windows. The coffee machine runs while I prepare for the day, and Mom's recipe notebook remains on my counter. Sometimes I still go to Costco on Sundays. Sometimes I check my retirement account. But my future is no longer attached to someone else's last name. My revenge was never noise. It was never going back to scream at the people who humiliated me. My revenge was refusing to feel ashamed of what my own hands could create. I left a house where my cooking was valued at the price of a dog's bowl, and today, those same hands set the table for my own life. If this story inspired you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories about courage, dignity, and second chances. Your support truly means a lot and helps us continue sharing meaningful stories. Thank you so much for watching until the end, and we hope to see you again soon.